Welcome to this Meet Your Trainer episode of Grant Talks, Conversations with Colleagues. I'm Lucy Morgan, Director of MyFed Trainer, and I am excited to be here with Diane H. Leonard, who is maybe introduced to the Grant Talks audience and also the MyFed Trainer audience who have not connected with her before. If your paths have not crossed with Diane before, let me share a little bit about her grant journey. She leads the grant writing training at MyFed Trainer, which is a leading provider of federal grants training and templates for recipients of federal grants such as states, local governments, tribal governments, nonprofits, and institutions of higher education. So welcome, Diane.
Thank you for having me, Lucy.
I am so excited to share this interview with you and this conversation with one of my favorite colleagues and most trusted colleagues in the grant writing space. So let's just jump right into it. Diane, tell us a little bit about your professional background and how you got to where you are today.
Well, like any grant professional, I have a winding path. None of us have the same journey in. It's not one of those things like I thought I was going to be a lawyer, right? When I was little, and well, not a lot of children, maybe more so now that grants have become so much wider spread. But not a lot of people grow up saying, "I'm going to be a grant professional." And so my professional background really is about having a fellowship as an undergraduate at Cornell University that let me design an internship anywhere in the world for any nonprofit or charity, and we would get a summer stipend. And I said, I want to know what grant makers do. What is that all about? And so I had the opportunity to actually start my career in grants on the grant seeking side and then become a full-time paid staff for the Michigan Women's Foundation, a statewide public foundation focusing on efforts supporting women and girls. And at that point, I said, grants are stressful for both sides. Does it have to be this way? And that started my wheels turning, and I took some time to be an employee as a grant seeker, and then, if you can believe it, 17 years ago, founded DH Leonard Consulting and Grant Writing Services. I know, I'm like, "Oh," but I haven't aged a day. No, none of us have around that time, but with the whole idea of helping to take the stress out of grants, both by providing writing services and by providing coaching and training, and having fun along the way, hearing about everyone else's professional backgrounds and differences. And I think that was why, Lucy, you and I really first connected 4 years ago-ish, back in 2019 when we started the conversation about working together on the grant writing boot camp. How could we make federal grants less stressful for organizations? So there's a whole lot more to the journey, but we don't have that kind of time, right? So we'll leave it at that.
And I just love that Diane likes to make learning fun. I know I've shared a lot of times with people that, I have my easy button. And when I first met Diane, she brought one of her grant celebration buttons to share with me. So I thought, there's a kindred spirit in making federal grants as fun as they possibly can be. And I just think that's so cool that you've been both on the grant giving side and the grant requesting in the grant writing space as well. Well, I'm a CPA and I did not start out as a young child wanting to be a CPA, but I did find that credentialing is helpful. And I noticed that you are also have numbers of credentials. What do you think from the professional development standpoint, what level of education or certifications do you feel that helped you become where you are today? And I know that you're a trainer at heart, so you always share what those alphabet soup mean. So I did not, with CPA being a certified public accountant. Which ones do you think really contributed to get you to where you are today?
Sure. So it's a heavy question because in looking at my own team members at DH Leonard Consulting, there's a whole bunch of different acronyms behind all of our different names, which points to that everyone has a winding path story.
Yeah.
But something that is consistent across our team, either received or working towards, is the GPC, the Grant Professional Credential. And that's through the Grant Professional Certification Institute. That doesn't mean we know all the things. I've yet to find such a credential. If you find one, please do let me know. Listeners as well. It doesn't mean we get all the grants. I haven't found that either. So also please do let me know if you find that like magic wand. But it does prove to our clients, to those who are like, wait, can't I just get a grant to do I have to report on it. It's not free money. It gives us then a platform to share about the ethics in our field and about the best practices in our work and about why we take the approach we do to make grants less stressful. So I think it is helpful for those conversations in the field. It's certainly not required to be, an amazing grant writer or grant professional. I feel similarly to that about like the CFRE, certified fundraising executives. Those can be some fantastic individuals working in the grant field who don't do it all the time and therefore got their CFRE, not the GPC. I have a whole host of other great colleagues that don't have any credentials. Maybe they have a master's though, or a graduate certificate in something that is, an area of passion for them, evaluation or health. So I think part of the answer too is really about what do you want to do with grants? What is your goal? For if there is something that helps you have a place to stand and like talk about the ethics of what you're doing or your approach, or to deepen your knowledge in a specific area. Um,
And I
yeah.
think that the fact that we share the GPA approved trainer is something where you're recognized by your colleagues as having this level of expertise in your area as a source matter expert. And that's been another fun thing to share behind our names when we
hmm
when we talk about credentialing. Well, with your long and winding journey into the grants field, what type of organization or entities have you worked with over the years?
Quite a varied list, because there are times where we love working with small organizations, grassroots organizations doing environmental justice work in small rural communities. There are times when we are working with large healthcare systems about state and federal grants. There are community based mental health clinics that we work with, focusing on health, federal grants, state grants, city grants, higher ed in a lot of different ways. So as a generalist firm, we've worked with all sorts of grant seeking organizations, I should say, of different shapes and sizes. The thing that really ties all of them together is that they are also agreeing we don't want to let grants stress us out. And they're trying to think about how grants can be sustainable. So they're not dependent on them regardless of their size, and that rather grants are being used to further their mission. And I think that is one of the most important questions when we're talking to an organization or thinking about delivering a training and someone says, "Hey, should I go to grant writing boot camp?" I'm not sure. I mean, I'd love to see you there. We're going to have a lot of fun, but like, talk to me about your why. Why do you want federal grants? Well, why do you want to take that effort on? Because what we're trying to find out is, do they think it's free money? No, not that it. That's not it. So it's really rather it's that drive, having purpose for how grants can help you do good, is what really is the similarity when I think about entities of types of groups we've worked with and still work with.
And, with over $1 trillion now flowing into federal grants, which is, the word almost seems overused, but I can't think of any better word than unprecedented. There is so much opportunity to help our communities through grant writing and good grant management, and to start, if they're new to federal grants, just start having that good foundation so that that can continue on into the future as well. And I'm sure there's not just the grant writing side, but there's some life experiences that prepared you for the training side and the educational side of what you do with grants. Can you share some of what that might have been?
I've thought about this question long and hard because, and I don't know if you know this story, Lucy. I took a Com 201 class back in college because it was an elective I thought were, and yes, it was like videotape style. I know I'm dating myself, right? But I was like, oh, I don't like anything about this. I didn't like being on camera. I didn't like being in front of the class of like 50 people. I'm like, how did I go from that, not liking public speaking, to loving being a trainer? I'm like, where did something must have happened, right? In terms of why I thought, and then I had a moment, and what it was, I was really nervous back when I was at the Michigan Women's Foundation, and I would be put on a panel as one of the funders talking to the community. And what I realized was that I had information that was really going to help those who were sitting there. And then realized, okay, they're not scary. I'm talking to these people and shaking hands and talking to them afterwards and working on their grants and their grant okay, we have a shared purpose for why we're here together, and there's something I can give them. And then I got a little more comfortable. That's when I found my punny humor button. Took a few years before I realized that that was part of like the way I feel comfortable and bring my authentic self.
Mhm.
So I think it's just been time because if I like think back on who I was back in Com 201 and how much I love helping support others through training, whether it's virtual or in person or as a keynote. I can't even believe I say those words. I don't think my Com 201 professor would believe that either. You keynote? Yeah. They'd be like, really? But part of it was just starting to feel comfortable and realizing that we're all being our authentic selves, focused on a shared goal of learning and growing together. And that there's no pressure that you have to have all the answers to, I would unless you
Yeah.
think I should have all the answers, Lucy. Is it okay that I don't?
I think when you find that credential that grants everything credential, then you will have all the answers. But I have to, I did not know that story about you with that communications class. And I have to share that when I was getting my undergraduate, which typically that is one of your first classes, I managed to postpone that till the absolute last time I could possibly take it because I was so terrified of public speaking as well. And it wasn't actually until the uniform guidance came out that I ever got up on a stage. I was going to just have this online company before online training was a thing. You know, I was country before country was cool because I was so terrified of public speaking. But it's exactly what you mentioned. When your why becomes big enough, and I thought of all the times I felt so alone and just wanted someone real and authentic to talk to about my questions. And I remember that every time that I got up on stage to say, I just want to help people. It really makes it all possible, having that big why. Well, you know, they say experience is the best teacher. I think you've probably heard that expression as well. And sometimes we learn from those bad experiences. What do you think is maybe the worst piece of grant advice that you've ever heard or received?
Just one, huh? Sometimes I think there's well-intentioned advice that isn't great, but I I have 2. I couldn't pick
Okay.
I can't pick just one. One is that there is free grant money. There's no such thing. There is some form of accountability that you will spend the money in the way that you said you would, even if we're talking about foundation stuff, let alone woo-hoo, all the things that go with government funding, right? So to me, I'm like, that is bad advice. If someone is saying that out loud, oh, you can just get a grant for that. The word just in front of anything should be the clue that you might want to think about that advice and if it works for you or not. So that's one. The other is similar in the sense that it uses the word just as well. And it was early on in my career when I was on the grant seeking side and well intentioned, super passionate colleagues in the organization. It was a statewide organization. So meant talking to lots of different staff and directors about things going on in their area. Can't you just write? You can just write it. And so what they were implying, their advice was, I've given you enough. Just go write it, which I believe is not good advice, not a good practice, because that idea implies that you are skipping parts of the grant life cycle, our best practices. You might be skipping some of the research work. You might be skipping the relationship development. Maybe you're shortchanging some of the conversations about smart objectives in your writing work. There's something about it that you're probably shortchanging if you follow that suggestion that you just write it.
That is some good advice. That is definitely some good advice. And that free money one, it's raining money, is one that I encounter a lot after they get the grant and they go, what rules? What do you mean we can't do whatever we want with that free money? And I know anytime there's a stimulus, whether we're talking back in the 2008, 2009 ARA days, or now with, you know, CARES Act and ARPA and all this, the money is flowing fast. It's hard to remember that at some point in the future, someone's going to want to see all that documentation that you were in too big of a hurry to put together. Oh, it's going to be an interesting period of time, I think. Well, there's so much exciting stuff going on in the grant community right now. What do you think is one of the most, or some, I won't limit you to one, some of the most exciting aspects of your job right now working in grants?
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to potentially share more than one thing. You'd think I'm indecisive. I'm not. I'm very decisive. But when it comes to picking some of these things, like, oh, so there's so much that is exciting that's happening, whether we're thinking about infrastructure or things happening in communities related to equity work. There's so much to choose from. But you know what the first thing is that came to mind for me wasn't the work that I'm so proud of what our team has done with organizations helping to support them. It actually is the work that I see in my own community, actually getting to see when we hear the news, we see the award letters, we see the reports, we see our clients share pictures, but they're not all right where I am, or they're not all right where my writers are. Everyone's spread out. So to me, the most exciting thing is actually getting to witness the grant money that we help secure in action. And so for me, that happens to be an organization that we work with that's helping to protect the St. Lawrence River. I see every day, every season, the benefit of that work. And so to me, it makes grants so real, so real. And Julie sees in that community center, in her community in Colorado, sees the work in action. And it's taking the words off the page and making them feel real so that we don't become, I don't want to say desensitized, but almost a little immune to like, what do these dollar figures actually mean, right?
Mhm.
This is none of this is a game. This is our real life, our real community. And so that to me is the most exciting thing is to actually see the building you helped get a grant for, the river and the impact on it, the children on the field trip that you got the funding for, right? Those are the moments that I think are the most exciting.
Yeah, it's so important to have that tie into the community that where these grants are being used. I probably like most people in the grants profession, we get these emails of, someone who's going to write your grants for you, and they just for a small percentage or something, and you look and you think this is not anyone who really knows anything about my community, so how is that even possible that they can understand what the issues are? So I really appreciate that you circled that back in what is exciting about working with grants. It's one of those professions I wish I discovered about 20 years sooner, because it has been such an amazing career path for me, and I'm sure a lot of other grant professionals feel that way as too do too. Well, who do you interface more? You have many different roles that you're working with. Who do you interface most with in your training role when you have that training hat on?
So honestly, it depends because there are so many different roles within an organization that are thinking about grants and trying to think about how to make them a bigger part of the revenue or a less stressful part of the way that they're implementing and reporting to funders. So what's really interesting is that if I think about the roles, or if I were to think about them as like generalized personas, across our trainings, whether it's something that I'm offering through DH Leonard Consulting or I'm doing with partners, like a 1 hour webinar with like Founded Technologies, right? Or like Bloomerang, or our big trainings of grant writing boot camp, things like that. We see such a diverse group of professionals who are there to learn how to make grants less stressful, how to make them more sustainable, a stronger part of their plan, that in any given training, if I were I'd have to ask, like, "Okay, tell me about your title, tell me about your role," because I would not wanna make an assumption because it won't be only one type of role or only
Hmm.
even 2 types of roles. It is so diverse across who we're seeing for participation, and you know what? I'm thrilled with that because that represents grant team members being in trainings, and a grant team is not a team of grant writers or grant professionals. I mean, I know you know that, Lucy, but
Mhm.
for everyone else, right? A grant team is the group of people who have a stake in seeing grants be successful. So ideally, that's representing all sorts of roles, and therefore all those roles, well, I welcome them in all our trainings of
Yeah, and
any
I know
shape and size.
sometimes you attract the people who are in similar roles. When I first started training back in 2010, when I started my Fed trainer, I would attract a lot of finance people because that's was my background. And I was so excited when there would be program people in the training, and now it's predominantly program folks with some finance people, and every once in a while we get an IT person. We're so excited because IT people have responsibilities too. It's so exciting to see that wide breadth of people who are all affected by federal grants. Do you find as a source matter expert in grant writing that that's a slightly different audience that you're interacting with, or is it still that wide range of people and
Well,
roles?
think it is a really wide range, and it's because different organizations, depending on their capacity for the staff, different people put on that grant hat, that put on that grant writing role, get pulled in, get asked to raise their hand. You just don't know, and I think that's why we see such diversity as well.
Ah, very good. Well, what do you think is one thing that people would find most surprising about your current role?
Yeah, right. That I only drink 1 cup of coffee a day, that I bounce between training and writing and running the team with one. uh, People that know me would probably laugh at that. That's the sort of thing that I bring into training environments, right? Like, let's have a little bit of fun. Um, no, I think what people might find surprising is that I still find like I am in writing work with my team every day on some level because that actual work, the practice of it, gives me such important lessons to bring into the training. Case studies to share. Hey, I just made this mistake the other day and I know better. And I made this mistake the other day. I went to self edit my own work. And then I went, wait, why would I need to tell one of the team members to edit instead? I, I can be very tactical and say, I'm in this with you. I think a lot of people think I have gone into just the training work, but
Mhm.
I like to stay grounded in the writing so that it keeps it really fresh and I can talk about what I'm seeing in portals and changes and experience it with those people who are also in our trainings as well.
Well, I was going to have to push back on that coffee item because I would have thought it was more than 1 cup because you are so energetic in your trainings. And every time I talk with you, I'm thinking, okay, she is coffeeed up before this. And I
It
know how much you love
used
a good
to
cup of
be.
coffee. Yeah.
Yeah, but now it's more about the hydration. 1 good cup a day to fuel the work.
And so it sounds like you've had some lessons learned in the coffee department. Are there other mistakes or speed bumps, as I call them, that you commonly see with organizations when they first commit to actually getting everyone on that same page, getting that common foundation of knowledge with grant training?
Yeah, I think there's a few potential speed bumps, things that could be well intentioned. Whoops, didn't think about that type moments. One is that it's important to have the training and the understanding. Now you've got shared understanding, shared language in the organization about what you have to do. The grants don't write themselves. They still take a fair amount of time to put together if they're going to be in a competitive way. The research work, the relationship work, the actual writing work, whether we're talking foundation state or our big federals like we talk about in grant writing boot camp, because we went through a training doesn't decrease the amount of effort it will take us. A federal grant, whether we go through grant writing boot camp and learn all the fun things with us or not, will still take us on average 100 people hours. Maybe it'll be more if we don't go through training because we'll be learning some, but it's not going to change the effort it will take. What instead it will change is the competitiveness of what we put forward. And I think that understanding is sometimes what people will miss. Oh, I went to the training. Perfect. Okay. Now it'll go faster and it'll be easier. No, E I know you have the easy button, Lucy, but it's not going to be that we get to push the easy button. It's that our effort is more likely to produce a competitive result. That's what it's changing for us. And so, yeah, I think that's a common misunderstanding. The other one I'll call out is that I, let's, I'm going to the training, and so then we'll be all set. But if others around me don't get some information, not that they always have to go to the whole training, but if they don't get at least some of the information, if capacity wasn't such that they could come together, now only one person understands what those best practices are that we're going to follow. And so trying to get everybody caught up to understand why something should be done a certain way can take a lot of extra time and effort. So it is nice when instead multiple people from a team or an organization can come to the training together.
So if you're working with an organization and it's one grant writer who has been designated to learn everything about grants, or it's an organization where there's a lot of new people, but they're not having that approach of sharing common language, common foundation, what do you think it would be a good first step for someone who may be feeling a little overwhelmed by that level of responsibility that's, being placed on their shoulders? That can feel pretty heavy to uh, try and bring the organization closer in alignment with some of the best practices for grant professionals, really all having a common understanding of what the requirements are, what the best practices are, because really the definition of inefficiency is to put all this effort in and not have a successful result with your grant writing.
True. And I think, if you're the single person that has that responsibility on your shoulders, there's a lot of risk that you're going to hear the just word. Can't you just? Right. That's common in that space. Well intentioned, but common. And the first thing that I recommend that people in that situation do is don't worry about training folks up to all the levels of grant best practices quite yet. First, let's talk about grant team and get some shared understanding there. And again, that's industry jargon for the group of people that have a stake in seeing grants be successful. Program folks, finance folks, IT folks, senior leadership. It might even be board, depending on your size, for how involved they are. But having a short conversation using some blog posts from the Grant Professionals Association or from our website at DH Leonard Consulting, or grabbing some little YouTube videos that talk about what is a grant team. Just spend a little bit of time building that understanding, because all of a sudden then there might be an increased desire and willingness to learn about best practices and how they can support in a different way. Because ultimately, why would they do it? They want to get the grant money. They want it to be sustainable. They don't want it to be stressful. So I think that first little step about grant team knowledge will help open the doors for others to be involved in a more meaningful way.
That's some good practical advice. I think the one question I get probably more than anything is, how do I get fill in the blank to do fill in the blank? And it really is about organizational development and how to bring people, get that team to come along with you, where you don't look behind you and realize you're out here by yourself. That's
Yeah.
an awful feeling, and something that I hope that people never experience, that they feel like they're by themselves with no advocates, no resources at all. I think that's one of the reasons why we have always included that e-mentoring with training,
Mm.
because we know that if we just fill your brain full of things and then you're done and you have no one to talk to, that's not going to be a good outcome. So having that ability to reach out to Diane or myself or one of the other source matter experts and really talk about, hey, now this has come up, what are the best practices for this, or what are some resources, really makes a big difference. Well, I'm going to shift gears on you, and we're going to stop talking, about the other folks. I would be really curious to see what are some of the most satisfying parts of your role as a trainer to you.
Mm. To me, it is so satisfying to hear. I mean, it's nice to, after surveys come back, to hear that people enjoyed the class. That's nice. I want you to enjoy the time that you're spending together. We get to know each other, about your organizations. I might even know if you like coffee or tea or water, what's fueling your work. But what's really satisfying about my role as a trainer is when I hear back from people after the fact. Okay, it came to fruition, and I put together my first logic model for this federal grant, and months passed and we got it. Followed your advice about pre-planning for this grant, and so we were ready with stuff drafted before it opened, and and we got it. Look at this picture. This was funded by a grant I wrote after I came to your class. Those are the things that just well, I think that my enthusiasm may have come through on that one in the screen just a little, but that to me, oh, that makes it all so worth it. I'll get up on stage all day long if people will share stories like that afterwards about how what they learned helped create impact for them in that way. Ooh, gives me goosebumps.
Yeah, that is very cool. Are there some final words of advice that you have for people who are looking to expand their careers, especially in this environment where there are a lot of grant dollars flowing?
Yeah. I would encourage you to look at the Grant Professionals Association. I started my career and did not know about it. I remember going to my very first national conference in Indianapolis, and I got off the plane and I went and I stood in line at the van shuttle for the hotel, and I met some of the most delightful people who are still dear friends to this day. This was, oh my goodness. Okay, yeah, many, many years ago. And I was like, wait, there's other people like me that like grants, that want to learn about grants, that want to talk about grants. And so I say the Grant Professionals Association is like my first answer for looking for networks because it is across the country, small rural communities like mine, big cities. You're likely to find someone to talk with and learn from and share with. But it might be Association of Fundraising Professionals or some other fundraising networking group. That's what I would recommend. Find people who share your passion or your interest that you can learn from, that are willing to share, willing to talk about it, even though in reality you might end up competing against each other a bit behind the scenes in the portals. Those that are open to sharing, I think that's a great way to focus on learning and thinking about your own personal next steps in your journey.
Thank you for that insight. If someone would like to get in touch with DH Leonard Consulting and Grant Writing Services, how should they get in touch?
Oh, they can they can take a look at our website, which is dhleonardconsulting.com, or reach out on social media. We're on LinkedIn or Twitter, Facebook, lots of options. And we're happy to talk with you in wherever, whatever way, whenever, however you want to talk about grants.
And to learn more about grant writing training, I encourage our listeners to go to myfedtrainer.com and check out Diane's class in Grant Writing Boot Camp. Well, thank you so much, Diane, for participating in this conversation with colleagues with Grant Talks and getting an introduction both on the MyFed Trainer audience and also the Grant Talks audience. Listeners, you can find all episodes of Grant Talks at granttalks.com, and I want to thank you for tuning into this week's episode.